okay with mask off for the speech? Yeah. Governor, okay with mask off for the speech?
Sure.
Yeah, well, from here, so that's good. Good. So good morning, everybody. I am Dave Hickey, and I'm the Worldwide President for Integrated Diagnostic Solutions here at BD. BD is very proud to have been part of the Maryland community since 1954. And we're very proud to call Sparks the home and the global headquarters of our Integrated Diagnostic Solutions business. Our team here in Sparks has played an integral role in responding to COVID-19. This includes the development of diagnostic tools for specimen collection, for transport, and such as swabs. We've deployed many molecular PCR tests on our BD MAX platform, and we're now bringing COVID-19 testing to the point of care with the BD Veritor, a small, handheld, portable, rapid device. And by the end of this week, through our partnership with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, a rapid point-of-care testing, antigen testing, will be in 70% of nursing homes throughout the country. And that includes about 50% of nursing homes right here in the state of Maryland. Over the last 6 months, we've been working with Maryland Governor Larry Hogan and leaders across the entire state to leverage multiple BD solutions in order to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. It is our absolute pleasure to have Governor Hogan with us today. And as you know, Larry Hogan was sworn in as the 62nd governor of Maryland in 2015. He was overwhelmingly re-elected in November of 2018 and became the second Republican governor to be re-elected in the history of the state. After being elected by his fellow governors last year, Governor Hogan recently completed a very successful term as chairman of the National Governors Association, and he consistently maintains one of the highest job approval ratings in the country. And now it is a great pleasure to let me turn the podium over to Governor Hogan, who has good news to share about our continued partnership. Governor Hogan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dave. Good morning. Thank you, Dave, and thank you to everyone at Becton Dickinson for inviting us to be here today for this exciting announcement. I know that BD CEO Tom Polen is proud to be a Maryland native, grew up in Easton. He's a graduate of both Salisbury University and Johns Hopkins. And I'll tell you, our state is very proud to have this BD facility here in Sparks, and proud of the incredible life-saving work that's being done here. We're proud of the 2,500 Marylanders who are part of the BD team, and your efforts truly are making a world of difference. I'm also pleased to recognize former USAID Administrator Dr. Raj Shah, who is the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, which works to identify innovative ideas and solutions to global challenges by advancing new frontiers of science, data, and policy. And I can tell you that throughout this crisis, Dr. Shah has been an outspoken advocate and leader for a more robust national testing strategy. And I'd like to thank the Rockefeller Foundation for the great work that they do. And Dr. Shah, thank you for joining us for this important announcement. Thank all of you for being here this morning. Back in mid-July, Dr. Shah and then later Tom Polen and I began discussing the ongoing shortages and delays in testing across the country and how we might be able to work together on some solutions. We talked about the exciting prospect of this new technology and of scaling up the production of rapid point-of-care antigen testing, which can deliver results on site in just 15 minutes. Using a safe, portable device that you just saw, that Dave showed, this point-of-care device, without any need to wait for days for a lab to come back with results. We decided that rather than just have the state of Maryland work on our own acquisition of these tests and competing with all the other states for access to these tests, that together with the Rockefeller Foundation, perhaps we could put together a compact with other states. And I immediately got to work and recruited 9 other governors from Michigan, Ohio, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Virginia, North Carolina, Utah, Arkansas, and Rhode Island, a total of 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats who came together to create a major bipartisan, first-of-its-kind interstate compact. The goal was initially acquiring and deploying 5 million rapid point-of-care antigen tests, 500,000 for each of the 10 states. This is the latest state-of-the-art technology in rapid testing, which will help to slow the spread of COVID-19 and help our states to speed up economic recovery. After signing on to the compact, the states immediately began discussions with the 2 U.S. manufacturers of these antigen tests, which have already been authorized with the emergency use authorization by the FDA, Becton Dickinson and Quidel. Today, I'm very pleased to announce that nearly all of the states have signed letters of commitment, and I'm pleased to announce that the state of Maryland will be the first state in the compact to move forward with an order with Becton Dickinson for the purchase of the first 250,000 of these BD Veritor tests, along with the BD Veritor system, the diagnostic machines used to process the tests in 15 minutes on site. This state-of-the-art rapid testing will be critically important to our continued economic recovery and will help us to speed and keep the people of our state safe. Our plan is to begin deploying these rapid tests to nursing homes and assisted living facilities in order to test all residents, staff, and visitors, and to our correctional and juvenile detention centers. We're also in discussions to send them to dormitories and campuses of our colleges and universities. This new acquisition will also help us tackle isolated outbreak and cluster scenarios similar to the situations we confronted earlier months ago in nursing homes and at the poultry processing plants on the Eastern Shore. These rapid tests will not take the place of our PCR diagnostic molecular tests, which continue to be the backbone of our state's long-term testing strategy. But this acquisition will give us another valuable tool in that strategy, which has successfully completed more than 2.1 million tests to nearly 25% of our state's population. I want to again thank BD, the Rockefeller Foundation, and my governor colleagues from states across the country who have joined us in this compact. Over the past 6 months, in the face of one of the most daunting challenges of our lifetime, America's governors have stepped up and led. And we didn't let the politics get in the way. We followed the expert advice. We have looked to each other and to our partners in the private sector for ideas, advice, and for assistance. And when it really mattered, we have worked together to achieve creative solutions. Today's announcement is another shining example of that. And I have no doubt that together we will continue to lead, that we will continue to work together to do whatever it takes to get our states and our nation back on track and on the road to recovery. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'm going to now turn the podium over to the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, Dr. Raj Shah, who will make some brief remarks on this landmark interstate compact and on the benefits of rapid testing. Dr. Shah?
Thank you, Governor Hogan. Thank you for your leadership and the speed and efficiency with which you brought together Republican and Democratic governors to craft a path forward for America to make COVID-19 something we can manage through and to support vulnerable communities here in Maryland and all around the nation. Thank you for your leadership. We were glad to partner with you in this effort because we know and have known for some time that testing is really the only way out. Complete shutdowns of the U.S. economy here in Maryland or anywhere else in the nation are simply not viable or affordable to the people who suffer the most when that takes place, essential workers and working families. And neither is it possible for America to tolerate the loss of lives in hospitals, nursing homes, and in particular minority communities around the nation from a disease that is not being effectively managed. Stepping in to solve the problem by creating this interstate testing compact, you, Governor Hogan, and your colleagues from 9 other states are now acquiring 5 million rapid screening tests to bring that tool to the front lines of this fight. These tests will allow people to get quick results within minutes and will do so at a sufficient sensitivity to ensure we can pinpoint those people who are positive and take them out of the chain of transmission much more quickly and much more effectively and in a much more comprehensive way than America has been able to do to this point. In order to support the broad and ubiquitous use of this type of test, the Rockefeller Foundation, Duke University, Arizona State, and a number of partners, including the states the governor mentioned, have released a new set of recommendations yesterday on how to use rapid screening tests in order to conduct screening activities in communities, in schools, in nursing homes, and in essential facilities around the nation. Right now, we're heading into a flu season, and the country is not yet doing 25 million tests a month. With this announcement today, with Governor Hogan's leadership, and with the new compact, we hope to get America to between 70 million and 200 million tests a month absolutely as soon as possible. Critical to doing so is real public-private partnership, and I want to thank our hosts at Becton Dickinson who have clearly stepped into the fight and are making a tremendous difference with the introduction of this new test, which will allow teachers, students, vulnerable families, and those who are elderly around the nation, and certainly in the state of Maryland, to have more confidence about their safety as they go about their daily activities. And I want to note that the Interstate Compact that has been launched is also collaborating closely as best we all can with the Department of Health and Human Services. And we recognize that this is not a political issue. It is an issue to help America get back on its feet, get our economy back, and get our schools operating again. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the Becton Dickinson team for hosting us. And we look forward to scaling this effort up as quickly and as significantly as we can. Thank you very much.
With that, we'd be happy to take a few questions. Pam? I'm sorry, there's a noise behind me back here, and you've got the mask, and I'm trying to... And what was the last part? I still didn't get the last one, but... oh, well, yeah. Yeah, so I'll maybe let Dennis Schrader, our Deputy Secretary of Health, who's here, but I believe this initial purchase is $8 million. It's roughly $30 per test. We're going to get them into utilization as soon as we get the first supply, which I think is days away. We're getting, in conjunction with the federal government, the machines and first round of tests out to nursing homes, in addition to and separate from this purchase. So we're anxious to get it implemented right away. And I believe that the funding is going to be covered by CARES Act funding or a CDC grant. Well, it's a great question, and maybe I'll let the expert, maybe I'll let Dave talk about the difference a little bit, or Dennis, but this does not replace the molecular or diagnostic testing that we're doing now, which is still much more sensitive. but these can have a completely different purpose. And they're because of the speed. Instead of waiting days, we can use these and get them done in 15 minutes. If you are positive on one of these tests, people will still follow up with a diagnostic test. So it's just part of the arsenal. And maybe we can have, if Dave's willing to come up, or Dennis want to come up and talk about it, but we're going to calculate them separately, which is the way the federal government recommends, and we're working with the White House Coronavirus Task Force. So we will still have our molecular testing and our positivity rates based on those, but we'll also separately track and follow and provide data on the rapid testing. But you can't kind of mix the two because it throws off the numbers.
Thank you, Governor. I'll cover the strategy question, and then I'll let Dave cover the technology question. CDC put out new guidance on the 16th of August, and they defined 3 types of testing. You've got diagnostic, screening, and surveillance, and this is targeted towards the screening. And the reason we were so attracted to the Rockefeller study is that they focused on that middle part, the screening, which is where we need to really move quickly. So, David, you want to talk on the technology side of it?
Yeah, so very good question. So actually both tests are actually diagnostic tests, so they both measure the sort of actual protein of the COVID pandemic, of the coronavirus itself. But it really is all just about the difference of overall clinical performance. So actually the point of care test is very, very accurate, 100% accuracy, as is the molecular test. But it really, we wanted to do 2 different platforms because of the molecular test. They typically tend to take longer. Oh, the AC switched off. They typically tend to take longer, so anything between 3 and 7-8 hours, and they give the ultimate in clinical performance. The Veritor test, while it's still highly accurate, highly sensitive, when you look at what we need to do as a nation to just test millions of people, we wanted to develop a platform that still was a true diagnostic test, but based on speed, cost, access, portability, we wanted to develop a different platform. So both have got a role in clinical utility, but this point of care one that's been announced today is really much more appropriate for sort of mass screening of the population.
Great question. And these protocols are evolving, so since the guidance came out on the 16th. But for those people who have symptoms and have obvious symptoms, we're going to still use the diagnostic tests. In congregate, in particularly, or the PCR testing, the diagnostic PCR, in congregate settings or where it's suspected that you've been exposed, we will be able to use test the asymptomatic people because you have to do it quickly and you want to screen out folks as quickly as possible, particularly in like nursing home settings where if somebody comes in off the street from the workforce, you want to be able to know quickly that that either they're infected or they're not infected because you don't want them exposing the population. And particularly in congregate settings where people are close together, like nursing homes or corrections, that becomes really important. So this is, again, an evolving protocols that we're developing the use cases. Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Raj? Thank you. That's a great question.
Well, in certain areas where community transmission is higher, regular screening testing on more active frequency protocols does make sense. And so if you look at the protocols that were released yesterday by Duke University, together with other partners, they identify how it might be possible for school kids, for example, to get tested once or twice a week if they're in a community where the level of community transmission warrants that in order to keep a school open and operational. But there's no blanket answer to that question simply because it really varies depending on the level of underlying community transmission in the community in question. The point I would just make to validate what both the governor and Dennis said is this is a breakthrough. This is an entirely new type of test, a screening test that can be used to supplement the typical clinical diagnostic system that Marylanders and the rest of the nation have been relying upon up to this date. And Governor Hogan in Maryland is the first state to go in boldly to put this kind of testing infrastructure in place for its citizens, and I suspect this will be critical to managing future outbreaks in the state of Maryland, and we think in the 9 other compact states, and soon we think across the nation.
What are the guidelines that not necessarily Purdue University?
So Dr. Mark McClellan, a former Republican head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, as well as the FDA, leads a group called the Margolis Center, which pulled together experts from around the nation and created, in consultation with Admiral Brett Giroir at the Department of Health and Human Services, a set of guidelines for how local community leaders and local health officials can use these types of screening tests in their community. So it offers specific guidance to those types of institutions based on the level of underlying community transmission and attempts to answer questions like how frequently would it be used if the level of community transmission is X or Y or Z.
No, that's okay.
I know that the FDA certainly likes the negative molecular test better. And Harvard Medical School says that these tests sometimes can be 50% false positive. Usually hovers around 20%.
Yeah.
But from other shows. So what is going to be the accuracy of this test?
Well, so maybe we'll let Becton Dickinson address that, Dave, but my understanding is this is a new generation of these rapid antigen tests, which is much more accurate. Either one of these gentlemen all 3 of them could probably answer it better than me. But the early tests that came out were not very effective, and we didn't utilize them in our state. So there were tests that came out that were roughly 50% accurate, which is, some states were using them, we chose not to. These tests are up in the 80, 84, 87% accurate. So it's not like the 97 to 100% that we do on the other tests, but you don't have to wait days or a week to get the result. In 15 minutes, we'll have a pretty good understanding. And my understanding is you don't have false negatives, right? You have some false positives, so that you're screening people and keeping them in. Is that a good answer? Right. Sure. What was the first part? And then I'll. Oh, yeah. So we're in discussions about that. We actually imagine that we'll be ramping these up and it'll go further than that. And the discussion with both BD and the other company, Quidel, along with the Rockefeller Foundation, the ultimate goal, we might use 100 million of these tests with a group of states. But this is the first batch. You don't need that many of them quite yet. We're going to get it into the system, and we are working in discussions about the timing of the delivery, when the production is available, and we're hoping that they work really well. We're talking with both companies actually, but I have a kind of a soft spot for the Maryland-based company here. The 2 of them got the emergency use authorization. The difference on the numbers, so the state of Maryland's numbers have always been the same for the past 6 months. It's the way that the Coronavirus Task Force and the CDC wants to see the numbers. It's comparing all the states, apples to apples. Johns Hopkins, which we're very proud of to have here in the state, has done some great work in doing the mapping and the tracking, but they use a different method. And they put out a comment a week or so ago. We're I think the most transparent state in the country. We provide more information than other states do. We actually talk about the number of people tested versus just the gross number of tests divided by the test divided by the number of tests by the population. So they're using some complicated algorithm where they're trying to adjust our more detailed numbers into a thing, and they're looking at it just a different set of metrics. But we're using the same ones that all the other states use and what the CDC and the Coronavirus Task Force use. So I'm not saying Hopkins' numbers are wrong, but they are significantly different. But we're comparing ourselves to the other 49 states, and we're consistently, we're 3.7% positivity as of today. That's better than 35 states in the country.
Help create this bipartisan 10-state compact, and we're here on the day after we've heard that the president may have actively misled the nation about how dangerous this is or what we should do. And what's your reaction to that as you have spent 6 months trying to tell people to wear a mask and stay at home? Your feelings about maybe how it worked against the message we're trying to get out?
Well, so I'm not going to break any new ground here. I've probably been more critical of the president on the lack of a national testing strategy and not taking this pandemic seriously enough. As I chaired the National Governors Association throughout the 6 months, just up until a couple of weeks ago. For 6 months, I was very outspoken. I've talked with all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, led the fight to push them to take it more seriously, to help ramp up the production of PPE and testing. And, so I think, I don't have too many comments. I mean, I saw the stuff yesterday. It didn't come as a shock to me because I think we're all aware of the president's comments and what the federal government has or hasn't done. But this, the good news is I think after we put this compact together, I think that now HHS and Admiral Giroir are now moving forward with similar kinds. They're talking about doing their own acquisition. So maybe we helped get them moving a little bit, but they're going to do some acquisitions to help with the nursing homes, and we certainly appreciate that. But yeah, no question, I've said repeatedly, in fact, I have a book, I think, about it that talks about the failures in the early part of the pandemic and messaging and in taking action at the federal level. And that's why we had to lead all the states and bring all the Republican and Democratic governors together to fight on our own. It's one of the reasons why we have this compact. It was all 50 states out there trying to compete with one another, and this made more sense. By the way, Dr. Shaw, who served, I said he headed up a USAID. That was under the Obama administration, so even more bipartisan cooperation here with the. Yeah.
On Tuesday, you went to Carolina County and praised that school system for the hybrid system that they've got underway.
Yeah.
But at the time that you visited, their positivity numbers and their new cases per 100,000 were the highest in the state, and certainly higher than the metrics that you released. Was it appropriate, based on the guidance that you gave 2 weeks ago, was it appropriate for the students to be back in those classrooms given those numbers?
Well, there were only a handful of kids back in those classrooms, and the local school boards have that authority. We set statewide guidelines and parameters, but we haven't told any school systems what to do. 16 of them are bringing a few kids back in some type of a hybrid situation. 8 counties are not bringing any kids back for the rest of the year. But that is their decision to make, and we're just providing all the best advice we can. Caroline County is a very small rural county, and the only kids that were in school were special needs kids who really need that hands-on instruction, face-to-face and person-to-person. They could not really take care of these kids at home and get them any kind of an educational opportunity. And a few kids who had connectivity issues and could not do distance learning from home, so they came into the school in the school gymnasium and sat there, and they helped them provide laptops and get connected so that they could follow the classes. But it was like 100 kids in the entire school spread out. We went in classrooms, there were no more than 4 or 5 kids anywhere. But I think they're doing a great job, and we're very happy with them. Caroline County's positivity rate is somewhat misleading because the population is so small. We had a nursing home outbreak, and so we went in there and tested a bunch of people in the nursing home, and that raised their positivity rate up for a few days, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's widespread community transmission in that county, and we haven't had any cases of kids in school.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.